My name is Natalie Wren. I'm 30 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've been the invisible architect behind my family's fashion empire. Designs? Mine. Vendor contracts? Mine. The very fabrics Chloe parades down runways? All mine. And yet, my name? Nowhere. The last time they left me off a guest list, I stood outside, heels sinking into pavement, listening to them toast Chloe's genius through glass doors I wasn't allowed to walk through. I swallowed my pride, smiled through tears, and told myself, next time, it'll be different. Tonight was that next time. Except this time, I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight past the doorman with a QR code that wasn't even meant for me. I stood in their ballroom, under their chandeliers, and I watched them celebrate my designs with someone else's name on them. What happened after? Changed everything. Before I continue, tell me, have you ever been erased from something you built? Leave a comment where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever been left out, overlooked, or underestimated by your own family. The last time this happened, I stood outside the glass-paneled doors of the Wren family's private event hall, heels sinking into the pavement, invitation mysteriously misplaced. Inside, I could hear them toasting Chloe's brilliance, her rise, her glow. And somewhere in those cheers, I heard the echo of my own designs, my own words, parroted back with someone else's name attached. Tonight, I didn't stand on the sidewalk. I passed the doorman with a smile and a QR code that wasn't meant for me. It belonged to a certain Nora Wells, a freelance editor who'd never confirmed her RSVP. Her digital pass had landed in my inbox thanks to a mistyped email. A small glitch, one I'd decided not to correct. Inside the Lafayette Grand Ballroom, everything shimmered. Gold-accented moldings stretched across the ceiling like vines. Crystal chandeliers reflected in marble floors. Velvet drapes pooled like ink at every corner. It was elegance. Manufactured, rehearsed. A stage, and not a single sign that I had ever existed. I lingered behind a gilded pillar near the back, the perfect vantage point. Waiters glided past with trays of rosé and orchid-laced amuse-bouche. Cameras flashed in controlled bursts, chasing Chloe's every smile. She stood in the center of it all, wrapped in a champagne silk column dress that curved around her like water. The original mind behind our Fall 2024 line. Elaine cooed into the mic, gesturing to her daughter with a reverence usually reserved for saints. That dress? I sketched it 2 years ago. I still remembered the fabric swatches I'd paired with that design, down to the mohair piping and diagonal drape that made it hang just so. But on Chloe, it was now called the Artemis. No attribution, no nod. Elaine, my mother, smiled wide as applause filled the room. Chloe's vision is unmatched. She has this innate ability to sense what women will want before they even do. Her words had a rhythm I recognized. I'd heard her use them once, on a podcast, when she introduced me as her secret weapon, back when I was still on the board, before the silence. They had scrubbed me well, from the press releases, from the website bios, from company archives, even the shareholders list. Clean, clinical, but not from the back end. I slipped my phone from my clutch, tilting it low under the tablecloth of an empty booth near the bar. A few taps brought me to the Ardent dashboard, the logistics platform still linked to my personal business account. Something they never bothered to change after freezing me out. Shipment number CWS-F 2024. Still pending. A collection of 35 bolts of Italian wool, dyed in exclusive colors only I had the vendor contract for. Due for delivery in 3 days. I hovered over the pause order button. Across the room, Chloe laughed into Mason Hall's ear. His laugh was hollow, quick, strategic. Chloe didn't notice the photographer angling a mirror shot that caught the edge of my reflection. I tapped. Pause order. All active Chloe Wren studio accounts. Just like that, the wheels slowed. No announcement, no crash. Not yet. But without that shipment, their fall preview production would stall. Media deadlines would slip. Fashion Week samples wouldn't make the runway. And investors? They didn't like delays. I slid the phone back into my clutch and stood. I didn't need to see the rest. Didn't need to hear the toast to family legacy or the faux humble nod Chloe would give when someone inevitably mentioned her meteoric rise. I left the gala before they noticed. But they'd notice soon enough, when the fabric never arrived. I signed away everything I built over coffee and a lie. Back then, I was running on 2 hours of sleep, 4 rejection emails, and the last flicker of a dream that refused to die. The dream had a name: Wren Studio. A sleek fusion of tech and textile, seeded from the nights I spent with Mom at her sewing table, reimagining classic silhouettes with built-in smart fabric. We used to sketch together, her lines sharp and precise, mine wild with potential. By June 2019, the potential had run out. Investors ghosted. My prototype line, embedded with biometric fibers, overheated during demo. A month later, my apartment lease was on life support, and I had $138.12 in my bank account. The startup was dead. I was its funeral director. Then Mom showed up. Elaine Wren, in heels that didn't belong on my cracked Brooklyn floorboards, set down a tray of croissants and coffee like she'd done it every morning. Chloe trailed behind her, delicate in a cream blouse, eyes darting at everything but me. "We're not here to judge, Nat," Mom said, smoothing her skirt. "We're here to preserve what you've created. This doesn't have to end." I remember the smell of coffee. Rich, nutty, foreign. She never liked my bodega brand. She laid out the papers with reverence, as if they were rescue documents instead of a carefully engineered trap. "Just a temporary transfer," she said, index finger tapping where I needed to sign. "Chloe has the credit score and the clean business record. You can relaunch everything later, under your own name if you want. But we need to act fast. I already have interest from a showroom." I looked at Chloe. Her expression was soft, almost shy. "I'll keep it safe," she whispered. I signed. That was the last day I believed in them. A week later, the brand launched, under a new name. Chloe Wren Studio. Same logo, minus the original tagline. Same collection, slightly retitled. My sketches, my tech integration, my supply network, all listed under Chloe's visionary leadership. They even kept the tagline's font. Just removed the quotation marks. I called. No answer. I emailed. The response came from Mason Hall, their legal guy. A PDF. One line. "You have waived your rights under Clause 4.2 of the Wren Transfer Agreement." Clause 4.2. The clause she'd told me was boilerplate. "Just formality," she had said. I should have known better. The present-day glow of my laptop screen flickered in the dim light of my apartment. I opened the scan again. It had become a ritual. Punishment, maybe? Or preparation. There it was. My signature, slightly smudged. I remembered the pen. Black ink. Shaky hand. I remembered my thumbprint right under it, because Mom insisted on sealing it. At the bottom, in pristine Times New Roman, "I relinquish all rights to Wren Studio designs and trademarks." The sentence burned. They used my failure as their foundation, built success on my desperation, and for 5 years, I let them. I didn't fight it then, but now I own every bolt of fabric they need to breathe. They think they created a fashion empire. I built its bones. The glass walls of Ardent Supply's HQ shimmered under the morning light, casting long shadows across the polished floor. From the outside, it looked like every other modern facility off the turnpike: gray steel, corporate signage, an anonymous part of New Jersey's industrial sprawl. But on the top floor, behind frosted panes and biometric locks, I sat as a ghost in my own family's machine. Here, I wasn't Natalie Wren. I was Olive Harper, CEO, founder, the architect of the invisible. Sarah Brooks, my operations director, leaned against the doorway of my office with a tablet in hand, her brows knit with quiet urgency. 78%, she said. No greeting needed. That's how much of Chloe Wren Studios' fall line relies on our weaves. Tri-blend reactive knits, micro-stitch satin, your proprietary stretch luxe, all tagged for shipment CWS-F2024. I rotated my screen. The dashboard glowed red across Chloe's orders. Paused, awaiting logistics clearance. They're already panicking, Sarah added. We got 2 follow-up emails this morning. One from Chloe, one from someone named Mason Hall. Legal tone. Impatient as hell. I didn't need to open them. I could already hear Chloe's voice, clipped, overly polite, hiding a tantrum. We expect prompt resolution or will be forced to escalate through counsel. That kind of thing. I slid my chair back and crossed to the production screen. Shipment volumes scrolled like a heartbeat. Not just Chloe's line, half the boutique fashion market relied on Ardent now. I'd built the infrastructure Chloe never saw. While she posed for Vogue, I laid the fiber deals, sourced the dye partners, acquired the distribution rights across 3 continents. Chloe thought the empire was hers, but without me, she'd be dressing mannequins in burlap. Send a delay notice, I said to Sarah. Logistics bottleneck. Standard language. Sarah nodded and tapped the tablet. Done. A ping sounded on my computer. Chloe again? This time, bold font, all caps in the subject line. Urgent. Where is our fabric? I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the glass wall and watched the floor below. Machines hummed, humans moved like clockwork. Every seam, every stitch, every roll of fabric branded Ardent was a tether, and they were all tied to me. Sarah hovered behind me. You ready for the contract updates? Let's introduce a revision, I said, and she brought up the latest addendum. The supplier agreement looked innocuous at first glance: restructuring of lead times, raw material clauses, standard indemnity language. But Clause 12.4 was new, buried deep. It would convert any unpaid delay penalties into equity acquisition offers if left unresolved for more than 30 days. Legal poison, but wrapped in velvet. I took the stylus and signed. They wouldn't notice. Not yet. They'd keep yelling about fabric, thinking I was just a faceless supplier buried in a warehouse. I set the pen down, leaned back in my chair. Let them squirm, I said. They're about to learn what dependency feels like. Mason once called me naive. I wonder if he still thinks so now. He adjusted his tie with one hand, flicking through the pages of the supplier addendum with the other. His office, perched on the 35th floor of the Hall and Burns building in Midtown, gleamed with hard glass and curated restraint. Nothing unnecessary, nothing too loud. Just like Mason Hall. But something in Clause 12.4 refused to sit quietly. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing at the phrasing. In the event of non-payment or prolonged delay, the vendor reserves the right to seek equivalent equity consideration in lieu of traditional penalty. Unorthodox, legal, aggressive, and familiar. He tapped his keyboard, searching his archived inbox, folders long left untouched. The file took less than a minute to find: Rentec Pitch Deck, June 2019. The title slide opened. It was all there: Natalie's original vision for sustainable tech-integrated fashion, complete with supply chain safeguards and clause language that mirrored what he'd just read. Not word for word, but structurally identical. At the time, he'd passed on her proposal. Too idealistic, he had told his firm, underprepared. And maybe he even said it to her face. He couldn't remember. It had been 5 years and 100 deals ago. But now, the ghost of that pitch was staring at him from a signed Chloe Wren studio contract. Is there a problem? Chloe's voice cut through the silence, brittle as ever. Mason turned from the screen. She stood at the edge of his desk, scrolling her phone with one manicured finger. Her other hand clutched an iced matcha that dripped condensation onto his folders. This clause, he said, spinning the document toward her, is unusually aggressive, especially for a textile vendor. Chloe shrugged, not looking up. So? Fix it. It's already signed. Well, renegotiate. Mason didn't move. You know this isn't just a vendor, he said, his voice cooler now. They control 70% of your production line, and they're tightening the screws. That kind of leverage isn't accidental. Chloe sighed, tossing the matcha onto a coaster. Mason, it's fabric. They're late, we push back. Everyone postures. You're the lawyer, go posture. But Mason's mind was still spinning. Olive Harper, the name on the contract. He pulled up the onboarding email. Generic signature, no phone number. Just a secure domain address and a string of encrypted headers. He clicked Compose. Subject, Contract Clarification, Clause 12.4. 2. o.harper@ardentsupply.com. Message, your equity clause raises concerns. I'd appreciate clarification on its intent and enforcement precedent. He hesitated, then added, also, your phrasing echoes an old proposal I once reviewed. Curious if that's coincidence. He hit send. It took less than 5 minutes. The reply arrived with no header, no greeting. Just one line, sitting like a blade in the inbox. Still think I wasn't ready? Mason stared. Once, twice, 3 times. The hairs on his arm stood up. He leaned back, suddenly aware of the growing noise outside his windows, the thrum of New York, sharp and endless. The war had started. Quietly, but with precision. And if Natalie Wren was behind this, she wasn't the same girl who walked into his office with a trembling pitch deck and eyes full of belief. She was something else now, and for the first time in years he wasn't sure which sister would win. It only takes one thread to unravel a dress. I held them all. The conference room at Ardent felt colder that morning, even under the sharp July sun bleeding through the angled glass. Outside, the freight lines sat silent. Trucks stalled. Shipments halted. Inside, a different machinery clicked into motion. I stood at the head of the table, hands resting on the surface of a thick manila folder. Its weight wasn't from paper. It was from 5 years of silence, betrayal, and planning, layered, curated, stitched together like the very collections they paraded on runways. Sarah sat to my right, scrolling through the updated logistics freeze timeline. Across from her, Elena Cruz, my attorney, blunt and brilliant, clicked her pen once, then slid the binder toward me. Everything's in here, Elena said, signed and time-stamped, including the one your mother notarized on Chloe's behalf, without disclosing conflict of interest. And this, she tapped the tab labeled Trademarks, proves the transfer of intellectual property was never completed. Legally, they're sitting on a house of mirrors. I opened the binder. Page after page of documentation, e-signature trails, correspondence metadata, trademark registrations filed after the supposed handover. Elaine once told me, "You'll never hold the thread that matters." She was wrong. Sarah looked up from her screen. Final confirmation from Freight Control just came in. CWS-F 2024 is frozen at 82%. That gives them enough for exactly 0 full looks. Perfect. I walked to the whiteboard and sketched out a triangle. Legal, logistics, PR. At the center, control. each point leading to one outcome: collapse, but not chaos. Collapse by design. Elena, I said, schedule the cease delivery notice for noon. She nodded and flipped open her laptop. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and handed it to me. Incoming call request. Mason Hall. I raised an eyebrow, then answered. His voice was clipped, but not confrontational. Olive? Or is it Natalie now? I'm assuming you got your answer, I said evenly. A pause. I want to meet. Neutral ground? I offered. Number your ground. I think that's the only way this makes sense. Interesting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Arden HQ. You'll meet the real owner this time. Click. I handed the phone back and turned to Sarah. Prep a press packet. Full transparency, I said. Ownership disclosure, timeline of acquisition, CEO, Natalie Wren. Sarah's lips twitched, almost a smile. You sure? They made me invisible, I said. Let's see how they react when the spotlight swings back. I picked up the suspension notice. One signature. That's all it needed to become real. I signed. Effective immediately, all deliveries to Chloe Wren's studio were suspended for 14 business days, pending resolution of contract breach. And if they couldn't resolve it, that was never the plan. I stood, closing the binder with a quiet finality. They took everything I created, I said. Now I'll watch it unravel, stitch by stolen stitch. You can't manage a brand when your runway's empty. And Chloe just found that out. The central showroom of Chloe Wren's studio, usually curated down to the placement of a ribbon, was a scene of unfiltered chaos. Swatches littered the floor, samples lay unpressed, half the racks were missing key garments, and the whiteboard, normally etched with a color-coded schedule, had one phrase scrawled in red: shipment frozen. Chloe stood at the center like a dethroned queen, one heel off, the other digging into the carpet as she paced. Her assistant trailed behind, phone in hand, trying to relay updates no one wanted to hear. Elaine leaned against the edge of the conference table, arms folded, mouth tight. Her tailored blazer looked freshly steamed, but her expression frayed at the edges. In front of her, Mason sat with his laptop open, the contract addendum pulled up for the 5th time that morning. No one spoke. Not really. Just fragments. Where is it? Has anyone called logistics? Who signed off on that clause? Burnt silk, Chloe snapped suddenly, grabbing a sample swatch and waving it in the air. The centerpiece of the entire fall line. Where is it? Warehouse 3, Ardent Supply, New Jersey. The assistant answered with a stammer, still marked as on hold. Elaine turned sharply toward Mason. Call the CEO, whoever they are. Now. Mason didn't move. He looked up slowly. We don't know who the CEO is. Chloe blinked. What? We've only dealt with someone named Olive Harper, Mason continued. Alias? Proxy? We don't even have a physical address, just routing contacts through encrypted servers. It's locked tighter than a shell company in Luxembourg. Elaine's jaw clenched. I don't care if it's a damn robot. Find a name. Across the city, I sat in my apartment, wrapped in soft light and silence, reading an email that had just leaked out of Chloe's internal team. Subject: Does anyone know who really owns Ardent? The irony hit like perfume on old fabric. Familiar, a little sickening, still powerful. I sipped my tea and watched the panic unfold in real time. Chloe's voice, through a leaked audio clip, trembled at the edges. We promised buyers delivery by July 14th. Saks, Bloomingdale's, Net-a-Porter. What do I tell them? Elaine's voice followed, steel through smoke. You tell them we're in control. No one shuts us down unless we let them. A beat of silence. And in mine? I laughed under my breath. You let me, I whispered. Back in the showroom, Mason quietly shut his laptop, folding his hands over it. He didn't look at anyone. Elaine gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. We have 24 hours to either fulfill orders or draft apologies. I won't go down over textiles. She pointed a lacquered finger at Chloe. Call the mill directly, demand access, or replace the fabric. We can't, Chloe shouted. That silk was my whole vision. We've previewed it to press, to clients, to... She stopped, walked to the head of the table, picked up the blueprint sketch of her showcase design. Soft orange dress with interwoven copper threading. She stared at it, then slammed it down. This was supposed to be my legacy. A quiet voice, just beyond the frame of the security footage, just past the closed door, answered her. Was. They sent a lawyer. I sent an invoice. The sky over Manhattan had already faded to a bruised violet by the time Chloe stormed into Mason's office at Hall and Burns. The glass walls reflected her tension. Perfectly waved hair gone flat in humidity, heels clicking too loudly on the marble, and a stack of incomplete lookbooks clutched tight in her hands like they might still matter. We're doing this now, she snapped. Mason didn't respond, just slid his laptop across the table and opened the call. The ardent contact logged in precisely at 7 p.m. The screen came to life. A sterile office appeared. Frosted glass, clean lines, the Ardent Supply logo frosted on the far wall. But it was the woman who commanded the space. Dark blouse, straight posture, calm eyes that didn't blink more than they had to. Ms. Harper, Chloe began, her voice tight, you're destroying our collection. The woman, Natalie, tilted her head slightly. Not destroying, she said softly, reminding you who built it. Behind her, a woman sat quietly, pen poised above a yellow legal pad. Sarah, I knew, though they didn't. Mason sat still, but his gaze narrowed. There was something in her cadence, the way she said built, not as a claim, but as a reminder. I don't think you understand what's at stake, Chloe said, pushing forward. We've invested over $400,000 in previews. The press packets, the venues, are all predicated on access to intellectual property you don't own. Natalie cut in, her tone still measured. Use of our proprietary textile patterns, and more notably, our internal model tags filed under Wren Originals. Wren Originals isn't even pending legal restoration, Natalie said, and tapped her keyboard. Mason's inbox pinged. An attachment appeared. Invoice number CWS-term-0710.pdf. Chloe reached across and yanked Mason's laptop toward her. Line item: improper use of license trademark clause. 7.2. Termination for impersonation of prior owner total. Due: $2,315,200 for a second. All sound in the room evaporated. I suggest you pay the invoice, Natalie said, or cease using any mention of the Wren name on promotional assets until legal arbitration is complete. Chloe stood slowly. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about what's mine, Natalie replied. And Mason? He looked up, caught in her gaze. Still think I wasn't ready? Click. The call ended. The screen went dark. Mason closed the laptop gently, but the room was far from quiet. Chloe let out a sharp breath, the kind just short of a scream. This is extortion. She's not bluffing, Mason said finally. She's building a case. And if she's behind Ardent, she already owns the foundation. Before Chloe could respond, the door burst open. Elaine swept in, phone in hand. We've got a bigger problem, she said, her voice like ice on glass. Our inboxes are pinging with alerts. She turned her phone to show them. Email. Subject: Trademark Alert Body. Wren Originals. Pending legal restoration to N. Wren. Chloe dropped the lookbooks on the table. They scattered like feathers. Nothing was holding them together anymore. The best traps are sewn into the seams. And I wrote every stitch. The room wasn't much. Just a pale government-issue conference table, a humming fluorescent light above, and the quiet click of Elena's pen against the folder as she flipped it open. But to me, it might as well have been a runway. The moment I'd been designing for years had finally arrived. Not in silk or chiffon, but in clauses and signatures. "Are you sure you want to do this under your real name?" Elena asked, eyes meeting mine across the table. Her voice was low, cautious, but steady. "Yes," I said. "It's time." The clerk from the U.S. Trademark Arbitration Office adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "You're filing for temporary suspension of the Chloe Wren studio mark?" Elena nodded, sliding forward a packet marked Supplemental Clause 19B, dated from a dusty June 2019 contract. This clause allows for immediate pause on a brand's use of a registered trademark if evidence surfaces that the original author was misrepresented or omitted. My client, she tapped the header, Natalie Wren, was never publicly disclosed as the originator of Wren Studios' intellectual property, despite her legal input in the founding documents. The clerk skimmed the line. In the event of concealed authorship, rights to commercial use shall revert to the original contributor pending arbitration. No flourish, no drama, just the truth, finally on paper. "And this, Olive Harper?" the clerk asked, looking between us. I took a slow breath. That was a necessary veil, but for this. I turned the final page and pulled the pen from Elena's fingers. "I'm signing in full." The pen scratched across the form. Natalie Elaine Wren. As the final loop of my name crossed the paper, Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled. "They've received the notice." We both stood as the clerk stamped the suspension into the system. Her voice was procedural, but it struck like a drumbeat. "Effective immediately, pending hearing. No promotional or commercial use of the term Wren Studio, nor any derivative, shall be permitted by Chloe Wren Studio or its affiliates." I paused before leaving. The sign outside the court door caught my eye. Cold metal on wood. Commercial filing. Case 22-0743-A. Plaintiff, Natalie Wren, textile originator. This wasn't a whisper anymore. Across the city, in a room paneled with walnut and drenched in afternoon shadow, Mason Hall opened his inbox. The notification subject line alone made him sit up straighter. "Trademark use suspended. Action required." He scanned the contents once, then twice. His jaw tensed. In the attached PDF, the plaintiff's name appeared with the clarity of a blade. Natalie Elaine Wren. Without a word, he tapped open his calendar and canceled his next meeting, the one with Elaine. He didn't offer an excuse. He just shut the laptop, leaned back in his chair, and exhaled. Everything had just changed. It took them 5 years to erase me. It took me 5 weeks to collapse it all. The live stream began with too much light. Chloe was always lit like she belonged on the cover of something. Vanity Fair, Vogue, or her own self-made delusion. A sterile white backdrop framed her face like a halo, but her eyes were sharp, unfocused. She blinked twice before smiling. "Hi, everyone," she began, voice steadier than I expected. "I know there's been noise about fabric delays, about ownership, about family." A carefully timed pause. "And I wanted to clarify a few things. Personally, I was sitting in my own apartment, far from the bright sets and PR rehearsals. No makeup, no prep. Just me, the soft glow of my laptop, and Sarah on speaker beside me, typing as she monitored the feed's engagement metrics. "She's losing control already," Sarah whispered. "View count's climbing, but comments are split. She's stalling." On screen, Chloe exhaled as if rehearsed. "Natalie Wren is my sister. And yes, she was involved in the early vision of what became Chloe Wren Studio." Another pause, then the twist. But after her tech fashion startup failed, our family helped her. Quietly, financially. Because that's what you do for family, even when they leave. My fingers clenched around the arm of the chair. She's weaponizing charity, I muttered. Sarah was faster. She just admitted a support fund existed. Watch the pin comment. A banner slid across Chloe's video. We offered support out of compassion, not obligation. Natalie Wren. Shock family first. Underneath, a link. Statement of disbursement. Support fund for NA. Wren, 2020 to 2021. The document was laughably vague. No signatures, no numbers. Just a title, meant to cast doubt, to shift the power dynamic back in her favor. I watched as her tone softened. We don't hold resentment. We only ever wanted to build something beautiful, for people, together. The screen lingered a moment on her face. Wide eyes, glossed lips, a fabricated sincerity so well practiced it could pass for truth. Then it ended. I didn't move. My chest was tight. Not with fear, but rage carefully folded into resolve. She just confessed, Sarah said. On record. To using your name in brand materials while claiming you'd walked away. That's not damage control. That's usable. The cursor blinked in front of me. My studio lights were still off. Camera cold, untouched. For 5 weeks, I'd dismantled them silently. This would be my first word. Sarah spoke again, quieter now. You don't have to wait anymore. I reached toward the desk, brushed a hand over the edge of my old Ardent sample book, the one they'd left off every press release. This time, I said, flicking the switch on my camera, they'll hear it from me. The screen lit up with a countdown. 3, 2, 1. And then I pressed record. They wanted a polished story. I gave them the pattern and the proof. The video opened in silence. No dramatic music, no cutting montage. Just me, seated against a blank backdrop, a thin stack of documents in my lap, and my name, Natalie E. Wren, typed in the lower corner like a watermark finally returned to its rightful place. I looked directly into the lens. My voice was even. 3 years ago, the world was introduced to Chloe Wren's studio. The brand was praised for its innovation in fabric texture hybrids and modular cuts. But the truth is, those designs weren't born in a showroom. I slid a drawing across the frame, paper slightly wrinkled from years in storage, the sketch of the Wren wrap jacket in blue ink. My signature curved along the bottom edge. They were born here, I said, on the floor of my studio apartment in Brooklyn, on nights I couldn't afford heat, on mornings before investor calls I thought would save me. Sarah had uploaded the video at 6 a.m. sharp. By 8:15, it hit 10,000 views. By noon, it was climbing into 6 figures, trending on 3 design platforms and spreading into unexpected corners. Real Wren, our textile truth. Silent founder. I continued on screen, unfolding the narrative stitch by stolen stitch. I trusted my mother and sister when they said they'd protect the work. They said it was just paperwork, that we'd always be a team. The screen split, displaying scanned contracts. Red circles highlighted key lines, transfer of ownership, temporary custodianship, no expiration clause. They took that trust, I said, and trademarked my name under theirs. Attached was the original 3D rendering file, dated and metadata verified from 2018. Then, internal emails. Chloe asking Elaine, "Do we need to keep Natalie's initials on the drafts?" Next, a recording of a phone call from 2020. Elaine's voice, casual but firm. She won't push back. She never does. The internet pushed back for me. By sundown, the video had been shared over 1 million times. Influencers dissected it frame by frame. IP lawyers weighed in on legal subtext. Former Ardent employees began messaging Sarah with screenshots of early invoice trails. Mason watched the video in full from his office, lips tight. He didn't comment, didn't blink during the final few minutes. Then he tapped a name in his phone and said only, "We need to talk. Privately." On screen, I reached the final page of the binder. I looked up. "They built their fame on my silence," I said. "But I'm done being quiet." The screen cut to black. No music, no logo, just silence. Until the next morning when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Hi," a warm voice said, laced with awe. "We're from Fashion Lineage Weekly. We'd like to feature your story as the real founder." They invited me to the boardroom. They didn't expect me to bring receipts. I stepped into the CWS Tower boardroom just as Elaine finished her opening remarks, her voice laced with calculated confidence. She wore power like perfume, thick, suffocating, artificial. "This is nothing more than a coordinated smear campaign," she was saying. "We stand firm behind the truth. Chloe Wren Studio is, and has always been, a product of Chloe's vision and my experience." I didn't interrupt. Not yet. The boardroom held about 20 people, some in suits, some in silence. Marla Dean, the lead investor from Argent Venture Capital, sat near the head of the table, flanked by her assistant and two analysts. Jess Palmer from Fashion Accountability Network adjusted her mic discreetly. Mason stood near the glass wall, hands in his pockets, unreadable. Chloe was perched next to Elaine, trying to look unbothered, but the sheen of sweat at her collarbones betrayed her. I reached into my leather folio and handed a cream-colored envelope to the board's executive assistant. "For the record," I said, "this is a certified legal notice of shareholder participation from Ardent Holdings." Elaine froze. Chloe blinked. Marla arched a brow. "I hold 12% voting interest through an LLC that merged with Ardent in 2023, I continued, walking to the screen near the far wall, "which gives me the right to request clarification on any asset entangled in pending litigation, especially one built on my name." I plugged in the USB. The projector came alive. Slide 1. A timeline. 2017, initial sketches. 2018. Trademark filed, WRENTEXTILELAB 2019. Email. "Just sign it, Natalie. You'll always be part of it." Slide 2. Hand-sketched concepts, dated in ink. Slide 3. Fabric test photos from a prototype, stored in an Ardent email folder time-stamped 6 months before Chloe's first collection launch. Slide 4. A photo of me and Elaine, coffee mugs in hand, captioned in handwritten Sharpie, "For our dream, Wren Studio." Chloe cut in, voice brittle. "That doesn't mean anything. Everyone sketches. That's a vague idea, not a business." I turned calmly to the next slide. "Copyright application filed February 2019, before I signed anything, before you even registered your first business license." A hush fell over the room. Marla leaned forward, flipping through the hard copy binder I'd passed to the investor panel. "Ms. Wren," she said, her tone measured, "do you have legal representation confirming these claims?" "I do, and we're filing for formal reinstatement of intellectual property as of next week." Elaine broke in, desperate now. "This is absurd. We built this." Natalie left. "Left," I repeated. "Or was erased." Marla set her binder down. "Until these claims are legally resolved, Argent is suspending all additional funding, effective immediately." The words detonated in the air. Chloe's face collapsed. Elaine stood up so fast her chair rattled. "This is still ours?" she hissed, the veneer of control gone. I met her eyes, slow and even. "Not if I take it back in court. They stitched lies into every seam. I just pulled the right one." The article dropped at 8:02 a.m., wrapped in the subtle confidence only investigative journalism dares to wear. Jess Palmer's name sat at the top of the byline, bold against the backdrop of Fashion Accountability Network's signature red and silver masthead. Behind the thread, the real Wren sister, subheading, "The Empire was built." But not by who you think. By 8:13, the link had over 70,000 shares. The headline was just the beginning. Buried in the article's third act, after the timeline breakdown, after the side-by-side comparisons of Natalie's sketches and Chloe's fall originals, came the real thread, the one that unraveled everything. Exhibit D, internal email, CWS Legal Department from Chloe Wren to Mason Hall. Subject, rewording Natalie's signature page. Just forge it, she'll never know. No one ever checks timestamps. Sarah turned the screen toward me in silence. I didn't need to read it twice. I had lived it once. The moment it hit the press channels, chaos bloomed like ink in water. Elaine called for an emergency board meeting within the hour. None of the investors responded. Jess confirmed later that Marla Dean had sent a one-line email to all parties. "We do not fund fraud." At noon, Chloe's assistant, the one who used to curate her quote of the day Instagram captions, posted a quiet story. "I quit. Some lies wear too much makeup." By 1:30, Mason Hall issued a public statement. "Effective immediately, I have terminated my legal services with Chloe Wren Studio and withdraw from all pending trademark appeals." Elaine live-streamed her outrage from the empty CWS Tower boardroom. Alone. Her voice echoed against the mahogany walls as she banged her hand on the table and demanded apologies from ghosts that weren't coming. "I built this. I built all of this," she screamed, eyes glassy, hair falling out of its immaculate twist. "You think she was the only one who sacrificed?" I watched in silence. No need to speak. Her unraveling played out in 1080p, and then came the final stitch. At 4:47 p.m., the U.S. Copyright and Trademark Commission sent a formal notice. Subject, Chloe Wren Studio, IP under dispute. Effective immediately, the brand name Chloe Wren Studio is subject to federal freeze pending legal clarification of rightful ownership. Frozen. In the middle of their busiest season. Sarah poured us both a quiet glass of wine, sliding mine across the table with a smirk. "They didn't just burn bridges," she said. "They lit their whole runway on fire." I raised my glass, not to toast, but to mark the end of a silence I'd worn too long. That's when my phone buzzed. A name I didn't expect on the screen. Marla Dean. One line. "Let's talk acquisition. ChatGPT Ja Noi. Hoja Mac Fanboy Trongvailua." But the seams were always splitting. The showroom lights dimmed for the last time at 7:12 p.m. on a Tuesday. No farewell post, no curated farewell photo, just a flicker, a power cut, and the silence that followed like dust settling over expensive fabric. Outside the CWS headquarters, protest signs leaned against the glass facade. Justice for Natalie trended in 6 countries. Influencers who once fought for a front-row seat at Chloe's launches now deleted old collabs, replacing them with statements about supporting original creators. Inside, Chloe sat alone in the media room, her makeup slightly smeared under the ring light. A script blinked on the teleprompter, but she ignored it. She looked into the lens and pressed record. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know how deep the damage was. I didn't know we were erasing someone." But the comment section wasn't buying it. "You didn't know whose sketches you were holding? You signed off on forged contracts and want us to believe you were innocent?" Natalie deserved better. By the time the video reached 200,000 views, the replies had turned brutal. Chloe shut the laptop. She didn't post again. Elaine, meanwhile, faced a sharper edge. A subpoena landed on her desk with the clean weight of karma. Investors alleged she had knowingly misrepresented internal control over trademarks and financial transparency. particularly the Natalie clause buried in early contracts. Marla Dean's team issued a statement. Ms. Elaine Wren's misrepresentation has placed our capital at risk. Legal action is underway. Elaine appeared briefly before cameras the following morning, flanked by two attorneys, her eyes sunken, mouth taut. She didn't deny the forged document. She didn't even attempt to justify the silencing. She just said, it was never meant to hurt her. And across town, on a quiet train bound for a press event in Brooklyn, I opened my phone and tweeted a single sentence. It did. And I healed. It took under 10 minutes to reach 50,000 likes. Sarah leaned over my shoulder and tapped her screen. Done, she said. It's filed. Your new brand name is officially registered. N. Wren Originals. The first piece would be called Reclaim. Later that night, Chloe left the studio. No cameras, no entourage, just the sound of her heels clicking against tile and the scrape of a chair pulled back. The sapphire anniversary ring Elaine gave her, once flaunted in every photo, slipped off her finger and landed on the table with a soft metallic ping. No one followed her. No one picked it up. I didn't just take back my name. I rebuilt what they broke. The scent hit first. Clean linen, soft cedarwood, and the faintest trace of bergamot. No branded diffuser, no artificial packaging. Just fabric, space, and air that felt like possibility. Tribeca's cobblestones glowed amber under the August sun as Wren Originals opened its doors for the first time. No flashing lights, no billboard. Just a small brass plaque against the glass. N. Wren, tailored from truth. Inside, the collection shimmered without apology, structured jackets that moved like sculpture, threads dyed in palettes drawn from sunsets and subway tiles. Nothing borrowed, every stitch signed. Sarah adjusted the lighting behind the register. You nervous? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I was watching the first guest, a retired boutique owner from the Upper East Side, gently run her fingers across a silk hem. She whispered to no one in particular, "This feels like care." Marla Dean arrived 15 minutes later, unannounced but unmistakable in her charcoal trench and minimalist silver cuff. You made good on every pitch deck, she said, slipping a folded contract onto the table. We're ready to expand distribution. International, if you're up for it. I smiled. One thread at a time. Elena Cruz joined near closing, holding a red envelope. Courier dropped this off, she said, her voice soft. My name was on the front, handwritten. Inside, a letter from Chloe. Neat cursive. Words like guilt, recognition, and finally, I'm sorry. I read it, folded it once, placed it in the drawer below the pattern book where my original sketches still lived. I didn't need to reply. That night, under warm gallery lights, I sat down for my first televised interview. The host leaned forward. After everything, what drove you to return? I didn't blink. I didn't come back for revenge, I said. I came back to reclaim myself. The air around the showroom shifted, lighter now, as if something had been lifted. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A small voice from the doorway. Excuse me. A girl, maybe 17, holding a canvas tote and wide-eyed wonder. Are you Natalie Wren? I turned, letting the quiet settle, letting the truth rest fully in my chest. Yes, I said, smiling. Finally. They erased me from the credits. Now my name is stitched into every thread. Applause rose like a swell as I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm but no longer blinding. For the first time, I wasn't a silhouette in the background. I was the name on the banner, the voice behind the microphone, the signature on the collection. Women in Design Summit, Founders Resilience Award. A title I never chased, but one I had earned stitch by stolen stitch. Sarah stood at the edge of the stage, arms crossed and eyes glassy. Marla gave a subtle nod from her seat beside the press row. The entire auditorium shimmered with soft hues and sharpened attention. I approached the podium. Sometimes, I began, voice steady, silence is mistaken for surrender. A pause. I chose creation instead. No flourish, no vengeance, just the truth, and the room gave it breath. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned to clusters of voices and clinking glasses. I shook hands, received congratulations, and took in the surreal ease of being seen without having to shout. A young woman approached, early 20s, sketchbook clutched to her chest. They said my designs were too real, too raw, she said. But then I saw your story. I smiled, remembering that version of myself. Let them call it raw, I said. Raw is where it starts. She grinned, eyes shining. Will you look at one of mine? I will, I said, and meant it. Across the room, near the exit, Chloe stood still. No camera crew, no applause, just a face I used to know. Older now, eyes lowered. She didn't approach. I didn't call her. She turned, then disappeared behind the closing doors. I walked to the display wall near the summit's exit where all speakers were asked to sign the event poster. Last time I'd been part of a brand celebration, my name was left off the brochure. This time, I took the black marker and wrote, Natalie Wren, founder, creator, still standing. Flashbulbs popped as media circled in, one voice cutting through. What's next for you, Natalie? I glanced down at my name. Permanent ink, clean lines, no erasure. Something bigger, I said. Then I smiled. But this time, with my name on it. They once said I wasn't essential, that I didn't belong in the room, or on the brand, or even on the family tree. I watched my name vanish from invitations, from contracts, from the walls I helped build. They thought erasing me would be the end of my story. It wasn't. Because I remembered every sketch they stole, every contract they doctored, every spotlight they blocked. I didn't just walk away. I watched, I studied, and I rebuilt. Piece by piece, thread by thread. I created a supply chain that fed their success, knowing one day I might need to pause the flow. I watched them praise each other for designs I drew by candlelight in a Brooklyn apartment. I stayed silent while they stood on stages I once dreamed of. But silence doesn't mean surrender. When the moment came, I didn't scream. I pressed a button. I paused their empire the same way they paused my existence. Without warning, without apology. And I did it with precision, not revenge. Because revenge fades. Precision changes outcomes. I didn't need to drag them through dirt. All I had to do was reveal the truth and let it walk beside me. The same truth they thought was buried under paperwork and pretense. The truth has no expiration date. It simply waits. Quietly, patiently, until someone dares to speak it out loud. And I did. I watched their empire buckle under its own vanity. The media they once controlled turned its lens toward me. The same shareholders who ignored my name now clung to it as the last credible thread. I never needed to scream that I mattered. All I had to do was show the world what I had built. And when they tried to discredit me with twisted stories of family support, I smiled. Because their confession was all the proof I needed, that they used my name when it suited them and buried it when it didn't. But you can't kill a name that's still living. You can't silence someone who's found a better microphone. In the end, I walked into the same boardroom that once ignored me, not to beg, not to fight, but to present receipts, not just of money or contracts, but of memory, of labor, of ownership. They looked up and finally saw me. But by then, I wasn't looking for their validation. I was building something they couldn't touch. Wren Originals was born not just from cloth and thread, but from fire, tempered by injustice, stitched with resolve. I never sent an apology. I never needed one back. Because this was never about reconciliation. It was about restoration. And I restored what they broke. Some stories begin with erasure. But they don't have to end there. Justice, when woven with courage, holds stronger than any stitched lie. Truth may be slow, but it never forgets its pattern. And when it returns, it doesn't whisper, it resounds. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, it may arrive late, but resonates once it's heard. Because no empire built on theft can survive the weight of the name it tried to erase. And that was how I took back everything they tried to erase. From the outside, it might look like a story about contracts, fabric shipments, and legal clauses. But for me, it was about something deeper. It was about reclaiming my voice, my name, and my worth. Not just in business, not just on paper, but in every room where I was once made to feel small. For years, I believed I had to stay quiet. That family loyalty meant swallowing disrespect, that if I just worked harder, if I stayed useful, if I didn't make waves, someday they'd recognize me. But the truth is, recognition built on silence isn't recognition at all. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't seek revenge. I just paused their empire long enough to remind them whose hands built its foundation. And you know what? If you're watching this, and you've ever felt erased, overlooked, sidelined by people who should have seen your worth from the start, you're not alone. Whether it's a family business, a group project, a relationship, or even just moments in life where people took your contributions for granted. I hope this story reminds you, you have the right to take up space. You have the right to reclaim what's yours. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep the peace. So here's my invitation to you. If you've ever stood on the outside of a room you helped build, if you've ever watched others get applause for work you poured your heart into, if you've ever been told, directly or indirectly, that you don't matter, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what moment made you realize, I deserve better than this. And if this video resonated with you, even just a little, please consider hitting that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about reclaiming voice, dignity, and identity. Especially when it feels like the world or your own family forgot who you are. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Thank you for staying till the end, for listening, and for reminding me that I'm not alone in this. I'll see you in the next video.